Okay, great. Now we have prepared everything we need to start in Unreal, and we are pretty much done with Maya. And so if you're following this course up here now, you should have a clean T-pose rig prepared for Unreal and a animation clip that exported and re-imported into Unreal and ready for this course. Also, if you did the previous course, you should have the camera animation and the T-pose ready as well. So the next step, right now, we're just gonna reassemble this whole character and animation scene in Unreal, and we're gonna put everything into a jungle set or a forest set. Here I use the Redwood collection for this whole environment, but if you didn't purchase that, in this course I'm going to show you how to use Unreal Free Asset just to build a really quick forest scene, just to sort of recreate what I had in the final one. And we're going to render out this whole sequence and also apply some nice lighting and atmospheric fog and post-processing, all this cool stuff. The key part in this course is I'm going to show you how to use the Unreal Sequencer to synchronize our character animation and our camera animation so we can play back exactly as what we saw in the Maya viewport. Okay, let's start from a fresh Unreal scene to recreate what you see right here. So before we start creating, I just want to give you another heads up that just in case you forgot or you missed in the previous couple courses, in this course we need to use a asset library from Unreal Learn section. So if you go to Unreal Launcher and go to the Learn section, we need to download the if we go to Learn, we scroll down, we need this Open World Demo Collection in order for us to have the assets we need for this course. This is all free. If you have Unreal account, you should be able to have access to it. And once you successfully import it, you should have this Kite demo package, which includes all the rocks and the trees and foliages that we will need. Let's create a new level, and we will create a new default level. Once we create this level, the first thing we would do is to find a place to save this level. Okay, now we find a place for it. Let's drag our world outliner. The world outliner is essentially the equivalent of Maya outliner. Let's delete some stuff that we don't need. We don't need a player start. We don't need a spherical reflection. We just keep the skylight, the default light, atmospheric fog, and the sky sphere. Okay, first thing first, we're gonna create a plane, the ground plane, for us to put our characters on. Okay, we're gonna use the landscape tool to create a default ground plane. And once you click it, we can select how big we want this landscape to be. We're just gonna get a 7x7 quads. And when we're creating this landscape, we can assign this landscape a default material. So if you download the Kite demo, if we go to the Kite demo folder and go to the environments and go to ground tile, we can grab a random or whatever you like to drag on top and to drag and drop into the default landscape material. So when we create this landscape mesh, we have already assigned this landscape default, just give it a rough color. And now this landscape tool will allow you to do a little sculpt on top of the surface to almost like a ZBrush sculpting tool, but this time we just do the landscape. But here, in order to save time, I'm not going to go into details to how to sculpt. We're just going to keep it flat because we're going to cover it with some foliage anyway. The next step, we're going to bring in our character and our camera. So because we want to bring the camera in right now so we know how much of the landscape we need for this whole sequence. We don't want to create extra stuff to take the extra memory, so we're just gonna see what the camera, we're just gonna create basically what the camera sees. So let's go to our character folder. We're just gonna drag and drop in a default T-pose character. We don't want the animated one for now. We're gonna drag and drop in a T-pose and zero out the translation. Don't worry too much about the size for now. We're gonna adjust the scale later on with the camera. And we're gonna drag and drop it in the camera T-pose as well. And the first thing first, we're gonna recalibrate the origin for this 2, because all the roots that we created in Maya for both bricks are at 0, 0, 0. So if we zero out the character T-pose and the camera T-pose, we should have them line up perfectly. The next thing we need is an empty actor. The empty actor is almost like an equivalent of Maya grouping operation. So if we put the character and the camera under this empty actor, if we scale or move this empty actor, we can move the character and the camera together and keep the character and the camera relatively unchanged. It's almost like we group the match move camera and group the match move environment and move them around in the world, but the relationship between them is the same. So we're just gonna drag and drop our camera T-pose under this character, empty character group we named into character camera group, and then also drag the hero, our character T-pose under that group. And after that, we're gonna zero out the translation. All this fuss we just did is basically like Control G grouping in Maya. Next step, we're just gonna move this group on top of the ground. If I'm not mistaken, the scale difference between our main character versus the Unreal assets, I think it's 10, scale difference 10. So if we scale this group up by 10 or 15, we should have a better scale comparing to the ground texture. It depends on how much you want to scale it. There's no a fixed number in this case. Well, I'm just purely eyeballing it. But well, the thing is, because we're using different assets that people create in different world scale, world space, so it's very important that we calibrate into them into sort of a relative cracked scale relationship. Although right now we have our character T-pose and our camera T-pose in here. Remember what we did in Maya, we only use a cube to represent a camera position. So next step, we need to create a Unreal Cinematic camera actor. So we actually have a proper working camera in Unreal. And next step, we just need to constrain the Unreal camera to the cube. Basically, when the cube moves, our Unreal camera moves. So it recreates the camera movement in Maya. To parent it, we just drag our cinematic camera actor under the camera T-pose. It will ask us which joint do we want to assign this camera actor to. So we're just going to assign to the joint 2, which is the local joint. And here, this script, if you're using this script to twist the camera, we need to rotate Unreal camera in X by 90 degrees. So here, we have successfully recalibrated everything. Now, if we assign the animation clip to it, everything will look identical as in Maya. So next thing, we need to create a sequencer to synchronize everything we have, because what we have in the scene right now is only the rig, the default rig itself. There's no animation clip attached yet. So let's create a camera sequencer called something you like. Okay, let's double click, open the sequencer. This sequencer is like a timeline in Maya, and because Unreal is a real-time engine, there is no world timeline in the situation, because the game, it's like, imagine it's a game that always running and always keep going forward. So if we want to something to play back, we need to create our own independent timeline. This is what sequencer is for. Sequencer is just like an individual timeline. You just need to wrap your head around this. Remember, Unreal, we need an individual timeline to synchronize actors' animation. Okay, as we can see, in Maya, our first frame is frame 990 and the last frame is frame 1153. And in Unreal, we don't necessarily have to put the first frame as 990, because whenever we import the animation, we become a clip, almost like the clip in tracks editor in Maya. So as long as our two clips, the character clips and the camera clips, they are in sync, they will get the right result. So the world timeline, the world time code doesn't really matter. We're just gonna keep it as is for now, and we can shift them later on. Okay, now it's very important step. We need to add our character into this timeline, so it will be affected by this timeline. So if we select our two characters and we go to track, we can have this option to add those two, the camera and the character, into this sequencer. Meaning that if I drag this time slider right now, only those two actors' time will be affected. So imagine if right now we have some smoke happening in the background, whatever is happening in the background. If we drag this timeline, the smoke, and they were just doing their own business, they won't be affected by this timeline. Only whatever in this sequencer will be affected by this time slider. So basically we create an individual timeline for only those two actors for us to synchronize their animation. So just a little bit extra step to wrap your head around. Okay, once we have the actors imported into our sequence, the next step, let's assign them with the animation clips that we prepared in the previous two courses. This right now what we have is only the T-pose for everything. So because when we import the animation clips, we already told Unreal Engine that the character running clips goes to the character rig and the camera moving clip goes to the camera rig. So once we click the add animation button, we only see that right now this hero rig can only be assigned with its running animation, so we don't mix around with different clips. And same thing, the camera rig only has access to the animation that has been assigned to when we import it. So once we import it, we drag the time slide. As you see, we have all the animation we exported from Maya. That's pretty much exactly what we had back in Maya. So we may need to extend our timeline a little bit to give it 200 frames. Okay. Because this two comes into clips, so we just need to make sure they start at the same frame so we have the same synchronized result. Okay, now let's look through the camera, see what we see from Unreal Camera. You see, we still have our old favorite camera shake. We have our character running, pretty much identical as what we saw in Maya, except for we have some texture. Here's one thing to pay attention is that although we switch our viewport from perspective to camera, but what we see here is not exactly what we're supposed to see from the camera itself. What we see right now is just almost like Unreal snapped the perspective view onto where the camera is. But if we click that little camera icon, what we see right now is exactly what we're supposed to see through the camera. And that has been cropped by its film back and see through the proper lens. So this is just the little things that you need to pay extra attention to. This little workaround. It's not a really workaround. It's just not really VFX friendly, I would say. Okay, so this is what we see through the camera with the lens, with the film back. Well, in the end, we can see the character is actually running out of the ground. So we can use our overall group, to offset everything backwards a little bit. We can click that just to go back to our perspective viewport. So at the end, we just need to drag our group back a little bit so we don't run out of the ground. Maybe a little bit. It's just like it's just moving the group in Maya. I'm trying my best to explain this concept, trying to find equivalent concept in Maya, so it's easier for you to understand if you are not really familiar with Unreal Engine. The next thing, we need to set up the Unreal camera the same film back parameters as the camera we have in Maya, so we can have the identical framing. So we go back to Maya, click out of Maya camera, and get the film back parameters. We can just grab those two parameters. We grab the millimeter number, and find our cinematic camera actor in Unreal, and then go down, set the same number to our film back. So it's 31.3 something and 13 and something. Okay, right now what we see here is the proper film back, and is the framing right now is the same as the one we had in Maya.
Purchase genuine tutorial. Enjoy the question answering from Course Tutor in the long term. Join the exclusive Facebook group and learn from each other. Also, you can sign up with Yihu.com. Search for the course ID. Obtain the full learning courseware, project files. Follow us on Facebook. Get closer to become a master in CG field.